My name is Alex Au. I'm from Singapore. I blog, or rather, I have a website. I started writing for my website in 1996, which was before the word blog was even invented, so I find it hard to call myself a blogger. But I'm basically a gay activist, and I got into new media because I needed to communicate my gay activism. Well, we've always been able to use the internet for activism. I guess with new tools, there are just more ways of using it. My take on this is that while the number of tools are increasing, there is also a danger that we are focusing too much on the technology and losing sight of the fact that at the end of, on the other side is another human being. And you still have to be able to read that human being's emotions, his fears, his hopes, his priorities, his or her priorities. And these human skills have always been important, never mind what the medium is, whether it is in print or radio or internet or Web 2.0. I have this feeling that sometimes, and this may not be a very popular opinion in a media conference like this, that we are too absorbed in all the bells and whistles and load up fantastic videos, but you forget that maybe people on the other side don't have the time or don't have the bandwidth to receive what you're trying to put out. So one has to still strike a balance. Okay, I was trying to bring to the attention of this conference that when we talk about censorship, we shouldn't only think in terms of censorship by an external body, be it the government or the company or the Google or I mean, let's not single out Google, but it just happened to be the flavor of the month, I suppose. There's a lot of internal censorship as well in the persons, and related to that, social censorship by your friends and your family around you. And that can be a hell of a lot more powerful than external censorship. In Singapore, it's mostly a case of internal self-censorship and social peer censorship. That is because we've had for 49 years the same party in power who have developed a number of techniques for maintaining their power. Those techniques include treating the opposition very harshly, treating dissenters in a way that isolates them from community and social life. And what results is that the whole society learns from these frightening examples to stay away from politics, to think that to talk about politics, to engage in criticism of the government is a dangerous activity. Even if the small number of people want to speak out, they may find that their mothers, their fathers, their boyfriends, their companies that they work for, their employers, may discourage them from doing that. So what we have is a situation now where the government doesn't really need to implement technical censorship because and the internet is relatively free. The only kinds of things that are clamped down upon would be pornography, not even all pornography, but some, and hate speech, where so far 3 persons have been prosecuted in the last 2 years. But other than that, the internet is free. You can criticize the government. What I was trying to say is that given this kind of social climate, while the few people who are brave can speak out, the problem is that people are afraid to take in, to listen to you, to hear you and act on it. What I wanted to do was to break this very simplistic modeling that as a country develops economically, it becomes to resemble the West more and more. It doesn't have to. Singapore is an example where the standard of living is approaching a number of Western European countries. And yet the social climate is different. People don't subscribe to the importance of liberties, of human rights. So they can still be rich, they can still be well off, and they still don't think like you. But also at the same time, I hope to pose the question, even in a country like America, Are there things that you are free to say, but because of the social climate, like supporting the Palestinian cause or whatever it is, you have no way of getting people interested in what you're going to say? It's maybe not just in Asia. Maybe in every country this phenomenon can be found. I was a gay activist before the internet arrived. So a lot of the things that I learned about activism would be the old style. I continue to find them useful. Among the things that I learned was that you engage the media, you give interviews, right? And you try to negotiate or deal with the policymakers when they are prepared to talk to you. You try to get people interested in the subject through personal participation and involvement. You have to create role models for people to look up to. Now, all these things don't depend on technology. All these things are techniques that perhaps technology may allow you to do in slightly more efficient ways, but they don't change. These are basics in human interaction, in persuasion, in changing attitudes, and so forth. What I fear is that given the technology of Web 2.0, especially in a place like Singapore, when people are still afraid of the government, bloggers remain anonymous. Because they remain anonymous, they are unable to undertake this kind of human interaction, which to me is very important in activism. Because if you're anonymous, how do you make yourself a role model? How do you make people like you and see you as a person, not just as a blog? How do you negotiate with the policymakers if you don't want to attend a meeting? How do you deal with the mainstream media if you don't want to give your name? These are things which I see happening in Singapore, which disturbs me. It's a lot of effort, but a lot of effort without getting the basics right. Privacy and anonymity can be self-defeating.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I hope people can. I'm not saying that it's all good or it's all bad, but you have to question these things.
Yeah. And maybe just finally, can you talk about the situation with your cause? We talked about communication, but with gay activism in Singapore, how do you see it? Where has it come?
It's come a long way in the 15 years that I have been involved in it. 15 years ago, there is still a law that makes it a crime, that makes homosexual sex a crime. 15 years ago, the police was actually enforcing the law. People were arrested, charged in court, sentenced to jail. We tried to create a lot of awareness about such things, not just myself, of course, lots of other activists at the same time. To a large extent, we have succeeded, whereas the law still exists, it is not really being used anymore. In a recent survey done, I think, early last year, where 800 young Singaporeans aged between 18 and 30 were interviewed in a survey, 50% of them said that they don't see homosexuality as a problem. That's half of the next generation, 50% of the next generation. So with time, this thing is obviously changing. I mean, maybe 10 years ago, only 10%, but now it's 50%. It's becoming a majority in a few more years. So things are obviously changing. And we think that this change is really due to the old style of activism, not due to the internet, because we were doing this 15 years ago, trying to communicate ideas and question old-fashioned ideas.